Let's take a look now at what's making headlines in the French papers. We're joined by Alison Sargent this morning. Alison, we're going to start with a call to arms to save the planet.
A call from 15,000 scientists from all over the world. They issued a statement yesterday, a warning to humankind. The entirety of that statement was reprinted in Le Monde. We can take a look at it. They say, soon it will be too late. This also came on the same day as the announcement that global carbon emissions are actually back on the rise after 3 years. So these scientists are calling for humans to make radical changes now. They say we must recognize that the Earth is our only home.
And it also comes as politicians and campaigners are meeting in Bonn in Germany for talks on climate change.
Right, and French papers are wondering if perhaps leaders that are gathering there are feeling a bit of a hangover. It's now been 2 years since kind of the triumph of the Paris Agreement at the COP21 here in Paris, and its goals are starting to seem farther and farther away. And the situation is actually so dire that Laurent Fabius, you might remember him, he's the former foreign minister and was the main architect of the Paris Climate Agreement. Well, he has given an interview to Le Parisien today to sound the alarm. He actually, I learned from this article, keeps that wooden gavel that he used to announce the climate agreement. He keeps it on his desk at the Constitutional Council, where he now works. He told Le Parisien, look, all hope is not lost for the planet, but Trump's decision to pull out of the Paris deal really flew in the face of both science and history, and he's worried that other countries actually now could use it as an excuse to do much less themselves.
Okay, and speaking of other accords, we see that European leaders have agreed a large-scale defence programme.
Right, French papers are calling this deal inédit, unprecedented. It was agreed yesterday by 23 European countries. They agreed to develop joint weapons programs and make it easier to launch external operations as a whole group. A sign for Le Figaro that Europe wants to, quote, emancipate itself from the United States when it comes to defence. The paper says this is both good news and bad news. It's good news because it does bring together so many countries. The bad news is that the more countries are involved, of course, the more complicated it's going to be to get them to all act together. Now, L'Opinion, meanwhile, a pro-business paper, worries about the presence of one country in particular in that deal, and that is Poland. L'Opinion says Poland is, quote, the Trojan horse of the United States, so that it kind of has the U.S.'s interests really at heart. And the paper is worried that Poland's current populist government could actually use its presence in the agreement to veto European projects and keep them from progressing.
And the French papers are also quite interested in what has been happening in Poland over the weekend, some protests there.
That's right. This was far kind of white, right, nationalist, crashed Polish Independence Day events with a rally of their own. They carried signs saying things like White Europe and Clean Blood. Really has shocked papers internationally and French papers in particular, but there hasn't been a big enough reaction in Poland. That's according to one researcher who was interviewed by Le Monde. She told the paper no one is reacting to what's happening in Poland, and she warns that the Polish government is really calling into question right now all the fundamental rights of democracy and trying to neutralize all of its opposition, and she raises the alarm particularly about the crackdown on the press.
Okay, back to France then. We saw the president here on Monday. He took part in a tour of some of Paris's the poorest regions in Paris.
That's right. Yesterday and today, Macron is on a tour of Paris's northern suburbs, or the banlieue as we often refer to them here in France, some of the poorest suburbs in the country. He's quote, launching the development of his urban policy, as you can read here in Le Figaro. Now, according to one columnist from the paper, this is an effort to really try and breathe some social action into his presidency, because after all, like we know, Macron has been getting quite a lot of criticism for being the president of the rich. And according to Libération, he could really use some new breath in his image, because as you can see on their front page today, 65% of French people feel like perdant. They feel like they're losing from Macron's presidency. But Libération tells him, look, it's not too late. Although they say Emmanuel Macron's main problem that he has to overcome is that internationally he's very much at home, but here in France he has a hard time making himself understood by the entire country.
And finally, Alison, the French papers as well have been looking at that heartbreaking story for Italian football fans.
That's right. Italy is going to be missing the World Cup for the first time in 60 years after they tied yesterday to Sweden and they had lost that first leg of the qualifiers. A national tragedy for the Italians and a shock for the rest of the world. French papers in particular are having a very hard time imagining the 2018 World Cup without their neighbors. You can see here France's sports paper L'Équipe is bidding the team goodbye. They say, Ciao Italia.
Okay, thank you for that, Alison. And we'll, of course, have more from Alison Sargent. She'll be back with a review of the international papers.